This is the industrial side. Most industrial businesses are either won or lost in the day-to-day operations. These are conversations with the operators who run these firms, talking about how they run them, what works, and what doesn't.
Anthony Perez, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you, Brian?
I'm living the dream. How about you?
Same thing, trying to stay cool out here in Phoenix. It's only 107 today.
In the pre-call, I was like, oh my God, that view out there is beautiful.
Yeah, you know what? It is beautiful, but you don't step outside to see it. It's too hot.
Yeah. No, when I was in the Air Force, I was stationed in Davis-Monthan out there,
Okay.
like Tucson, Arizona. So yeah, I mean, it looks pretty familiar. It's like super hot, but it's not so humid. So it's almost livable.
Yeah, no, Tucson's beautiful. I got to tell you, it's about a good 10 degrees cooler, so it's not as bad. And yeah, definitely got some good views.
Okay. Yeah. No. Well, I'm glad you're living the dream out there. You got your little fake plant by the window.
That's right. Water it. Don't have to water it.
But today we're going to talk about something you should water, your personal financial balance sheet. So this is kind of like part one of a two-part series I'm about to do, buying and selling. In this one, I'm going to talk about selling. Like I want to take the fully 100% take the perspective of a business owner on the industrial side of like manufacturing, distribution, some sort of like supporting service to that with a business, thinking about succession and like, yeah, just what the things they should do, not a year before, but 10 years before and all the way up. So I want to go into a lot of things and a lot of topics in that. It sounds like from what we've talked about before, you spend a lot of time talking to people about this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot that goes into it. So it's not, won't be able to cram it all in this short podcast, but at least we'll be able to kind of touch on the highlights.
Exactly. And we can always do it. We can always do another part. So I guess the first thing, I mean, like, what are you doing for who? Because I think I've heard wealth advisors, wealth managers. I have no idea what that means. So like, what do you actually do?
Yeah. So I basically, to summarize it, I help business owners answer three questions. So one is, what determines the value of my company? Number two is, how do I increase the value of my company? And then number three is, how do I make sure that the value of my company is going to, provide for my family and achieve my legacy, as a business owner. So in essence, what I do is I work with a business owner to kind of prepare their company to at some point exit. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a year from now, 3 years from now, but essentially what we try to get to a point where the owner has choices. They can kind of determine how and when they want to exit, on their own terms rather than on someone else's terms.
Okay. And so like that, to me that, I mean, I spent about a couple of years looking to buy business. And so to me, that sounds a lot like a business broker. Like how do you differentiate between the two? Like, do you just want to have a better name than business broker? So you called yourself a wealth advisor?
Yeah, definitely not a business broker. So business brokers are very different. So they're more transactional. And essentially, I will get the business owner up to the finish line. I would say the big differentiator is business brokers are typically working with some of the smaller businesses. I would say anywhere, up to about $1 million is usually their cap. And then you have investment bankers.
In EBITDA or?
So basically sale price. So whatever the company's, their enterprise value, whatever they're going to sell for. Business brokers, and some of them can go up to 3 million, but for the most part, they're right around in that range. And then when you're up above that and you're trying to sell your company for a higher dollar amount, you typically get investment bankers involved, so. But yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is I don't sell the company, I don't market it. I essentially basically put it on a platter so that the business broker, can pretty much has as little work to do as possible when they sell it.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting. I mean, like in all my times looking at businesses, there's been so many businesses that I loved, but like there's things they could have been fixing that, I have to go in front of investors. I have to go in front of banks. Like nobody's going to give them grace about, they didn't fix customer concentration. They didn't hire people to run marketing and finance. Like they basically like are not really managing their working capital very well. It's like things that, as somebody who's not taking like a passionate view of a company will just say, this thing is not worth buying. Like, It's like, I wish somebody said something. So, I mean, I think part of the purpose of this podcast, I want to get into what are those things? Like, let's start with yours. I'll jump in with mine at the end if there's time. But like, what are the things really that you're doing like early on to get somebody ready to sell?
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, I call those blind spots. I mean, these are things that most owners don't see that impact the value of the company. I mean, the biggest area that I see, because business owners are moving so fast, is they don't even understand what the value of their company is. So, I mean, just doing something as simple as just a basic business valuation to get a baseline is so critical. And then from there, it's, I would say probably the number one area that I see the most is owner dependency. So a lot of business owners, especially founders that started their company since day one, it's hard to kind of pull them away from the business, right? I mean, they want to be hands-on, they want to they want to be part of every decision. And so what ends up happening is they they limit the company from growing, they hit a ceiling. And so if there's not a process in place to start pulling them out of the business instead of having them work in the business, the company, again, it hits a ceiling, and so that I would say is probably the biggest area that I look at when I work with companies. The second piece you just touched on, which is client concentration. So I work with a lot of clients. Specifically, there's one that I'm working with now. We're pretty much at the finish line, but he has 80% of his revenue comes from two companies, and they're big companies. 80%. I mean, these are large companies. I mean, these are Fortune 500 companies. I mean, it's not. I mean, and so in his mind, he's thinking like, man, I got these huge contracts. Like everybody's going to want to get into these companies to service them. So my company must be really valuable. And so when we sat down, it was like, well, hey, listen, what ends up happening is these big companies, I mean, they price you on cost, right? I mean, everybody wants to work with them. So they're going to find the cheapest out there. And so if one day, you're not the cheapest and they go with somebody else, I mean, there goes 40, 60, 80% of your revenue. I mean, your company can basically disappear overnight. And so, that makes your company less attractive to a buyer because of that reason. I mean, a buyer is going to look at risk. They're not so much looking at, yes, I want to make sure that I get the cash flow, or yes, I want to make sure it's the right investment for you. But it's really about how do I reduce risk? So client concentration is a big one. Another areas are having the right processes and systems in place. I still see business owners that do everything on paper, or they have, a calendar that they use in Google as a way to kind of schedule things out.
Yeah.
So, those would be the top three. And then just rounding it out would be kind of around, your employees. Do you have the right bench strength in place to, take over the company? Because again, an acquirer or buyer is going to look at, hey, I'm acquiring your business. You're not going to be here anymore. So do you have the right team in place that can step in to kind of fill your shoes?
Yeah. Yeah, but I do have some sympathy for it because like these folks started businesses. I haven't started business at a time where things are a lot easier. There's AI and stuff. Like I have advisors that I can get to for not free, but like for $20 a month and not like $100 an hour, where I can double check my thinking on things very quickly. So, but even then, I'm still kind of at the center of a lot of things for now. I'm trying to work my way out of that. But when these folks start their companies in the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s, like this stuff wasn't here. Like the most valuable thing they could do is like take on everything that the people around them can't handle. So I guess what I'm wondering is like, I guess at one point, do you need them to start thinking like, instead of maybe like, how can I be most useful to the company right now? Like, how can I make the company most valuable right now? Like, at what point is this like when they hit 60? Is this like what's the milestone that gets them to the point where it's no longer about using what probably made the company last so long to keep pushing it to then be like stepping back and allowing other people or even new hires to take new positions in the company to replace them? Because I feel like that's the thing. It's like hard to know. It's hard to know like what's the moment like things need to change.
Yeah, so I think I encourage business owners, even if you're solopreneur, let's say you're just starting out, or maybe there's just you and a business partner, or three or four of you. I know this sounds silly, but I mean, you really should kind of map out what your org chart looks like what position. And even though you're going to be kind of putting your name into every single position, at least it kind of gives you a layout of what positions you will have to fill as you build the company. A lot of times what I'll see is that the business owner just sees themselves as doing everything, but they don't really understand, okay, I got to bring in a marketing person at some point. I'm going to have to bring in somebody that manages the operation side of it, the people aspect of it. And so a good exercise, and again, when you do this, you're essentially kind of saying, okay, these are all the rules that my company will need to have at some point. And you fill your name in, right? Because you're doing all of them. But then over a period of time, you're saying, okay, I've got enough capital now to where I can replace myself as the operations manager. I hire somebody now to run the operations. It's like, okay, now we can reinvest in our marketing, right? So now I don't have to do that job. And so over time, all of these jobs that you're doing just slowly go away. And what that allows you to do is be more strategic. Then you're starting to think about, okay, where's the vision for my company? Maybe I had a goal of getting to be $1 million company, but how do I get to a $10 million company? How do I get to a $100 million company? So you're able to be more strategic with your time rather than doing all of the other items that, are required for the business to even operate.
Yeah. But it's a give and take. It's hard because like that's something even I'm trying to do, but it's like people get used to you having your hand on the wheel and they rely on you. And now when your hand is no longer on the wheel, it's almost like they feel betrayed and like you don't care anymore kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like it's almost like you need like a therapist to be able to get through the change process of going from kind of what they're used to what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So one of the things that I see a lot is when I work with business owners and we go through this exercise, right? And it's like, how do we pull you outside of the business to free up your time to again work on the business? Like the first response is like, I feel guilty. It's like I have all this extra time now on my hands and I don't know what to do with it. I feel like my team's working so hard, but yet, I'm not putting in the 40, 50, 60 hours a week that I was used to. And so it's kind of that adjustment period to say, well, yes, you aren't in the business and you have this extra free time, but put that free time to work, right? That's where you're working on the strategy of the business. Because at the end of the day, your team is working hard, but they want to know that the company's, moving, right? That it's growing. And so that requires you to be more focused on the strategic side. And so, yeah, there is that little bit of a guilt. And then the other thing, too, is I would say is that as business owners, everybody wants to continue to be involved in the business. And it's fine. You just want to try to limit the amount of time. So instead of being in the business 100% time, maybe you're in it, you slowly get down. But at the end of the day, it's 20% of your time or 10% of your time. Just to kind of get there, show your team that you're engaged and that you're willing to kind of roll up your sleeves. It's just something that you don't want to be doing all the time.
Yeah. And then I think that's helpful in terms of just like things to fix with the company. Let's go back to customer concentration because this is one that even as a buyer, like sometimes in some ways I was in the position of a buyer. I totally get customer concentration. Like it's like you build your business around one customer and you learn them and you become valuable to them. And like you can make all your policies and procedures exactly what that customer needs. It's like it just like that's the easiest way to run a company. Instead of having to like change your face for 10,000 customers, like, oh, there's this one huge customer and these like 100 other customers. But this one customer is the one that matters. So like everybody's priority is that one, and that produces all of our revenue and cash flow, and the others are just like icing on the cake. Like I get that totally, but how do you get people from that to okay, we need to figure out how to diversify our revenue a bit?
Yes, I mean the first question I always ask is, well, again, let's say that customer just decides to give you a call and says, "Hey, yeah, I really appreciate the relationship. I've been with you for 10 years, but I got to move my business elsewhere. We're struggling maybe financially, and we need to get somebody that's going to do it cheaper." What does that do for your business, right? And, business owners like, well, I guess I'm going out of business because I don't have any customers. And then I would say too, it's important to have kind of a repeatable process that works for every customer. So you never want to get to a point where you are building your processes around one specific client. Because again, as you scale, it's kind of hard. You can't customize every relationship, as you scale, right? You have to come up with a way to standardize that, to onboard the client, what that customer experience looks like, how you continue to manage the relationship, whether it's a renewal contract or however you do it, it's got to be consistent across the board. Otherwise, A, it takes way too much time. And then B, you're putting in place, call it expectations from the client that as soon as you stop doing one or two of those things, it could put you at risk of losing that client. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a hard one. The other question is, I guess it goes back to time. Like, for instance, every business in the stage, like, startup, growth, maturity, kind of that. Like, hopefully you never get to decline. You just stay in maturity forever. But yeah, I mean, I think like the phases of a business, it affects the customer concentration thing, but it also like affects like every investment decision. And so like how do you like at what stage do you start working with someone? Would you work with a startup founder, or do you work with someone who's 20 years in? Like, how do you think about this, and why is
Yeah, so I always joke around when I talk to business owners, and the question I always ask is, when should you start, building a succession plan, kind of start thinking about an exit plan. I'll get to like, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and I'm like, no, the answer is that the day you start your business, like the day you start your business, you should have an exit or succession plan in mind. Because then you know where the finish line is and you can build your business to that point. As far as phases, I mean, at the entrepreneur level, there are basic things I can kind of give them advice on and give them direction on. My primary, area of expertise comes when they have hit that maturity level and they're kind of at a point where they're not necessarily in growth mode anymore. They're kind of in that, stability mode. And the thought process is kind of like, hey, things are good, I kind of want to start thinking about, or at least preparing myself for choices. So again, not necessarily to exit, I've literally, and as long as I've been doing this, I think this is maybe happened once or twice where somebody came to me is like, I'm looking to exit in exactly 3 years. Never happens. Never happens. So it's really about educating them on, again, choices. So I try to use the word choices instead of exit because, again, nobody says you have to exit now, but at least put your business and yourself personally in a position where, hey, if you got that offer tomorrow, you're saying, hey, I'm good to go. Or God forbid something happens to you from a health perspective, that, hey, I've done the right things to prepare my business to where, my family's going to be okay. My business is going to be okay. So yeah, it's all about choices.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I think the big component of all of this is just kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't think I've met anybody like this, but in TV shows and movies, when you see business people, quote unquote, they have a number. I got to grind. I got to do everything to get to that number. And I have
Yep.
never met anybody who has any idea what that number is. I don't know how I would ever know what that number is.
Yep.
Like that would change decision making at every step of the way to shift from I'm getting to that number now. I have the investments, I have the cash, I have everything that will get me to that number. Now I can look at succession. But who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Is that something you do? Do you work with people to figure out what the number is, the quote unquote number is, where if they had this much money or were on the track to get that much money,
Mhm.
they would not need to run their business anymore?
So that's a huge component of what I do. So, I do the business planning to help them understand again what drives the value of the company. But then, as I mentioned at the beginning, that third question is how do I make sure that the value of my company is going to support my family and my legacy forever? And that's what I call the real number. You just mentioned it. And so not only just understanding, what that number looks like, but it's also two areas that most business owners don't think about is the structure of the deal, right? I mean, I was working with a business owner about a year ago, got a $20 million offer on his business. I mean, the guy was jumping up and down, super excited, but when I looked at the deal, there was only about 7 million of it was cash at close, which is still, great number. But then the other 13 million was cut up into pieces where it was, part of it was an earnout. The other part of it was rollover, equity into the new company. And so when I broke that down for him, and then we took it to that next step, which is, okay, let's talk about taxes. At the end of the day, that $20 million offer, resulted in getting maybe about 4 million that year.
Jeez.
So you think about 20 million and going down to 4 million, and then there's no guarantee on the other one. So when you look at earnouts and you look at, rollover equity, there's no guarantee that you're getting that money. So, realistically, and he ended up backing out of selling the company after we kind of talked through it. Realistic, if he would have sold his company, he's only guaranteed, after tax $4 million, and he's 45 years old. There's no way $4 million is going to last someone, especially when you're living nowadays to you're 90 years old, 45 years on 4 million bucks. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So, I go through all those different scenarios with my clients to say, look, and that's why we talked about the valuation at the beginning. Okay, you got to understand what your company's worth today, what it could be worth, or what it could be worth if we do the right, take the right steps today. And then ultimately, is that the right number that you need post taxes? And so we'll run through all those different scenarios and see to make sure that they are going to achieve the right number.
Gotcha. No, I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Like, specifically from the lens of what you tell owners of companies. When we talk about seller notes or earnouts, like there's obviously, you're telling them what the risks are in their companies. The buyers are putting these tools in place to mitigate the risk. The example you just gave, 20 million, but only 7 in cash, seems like egregious. I don't think I would be able to keep a straight face if I submitted that offer. But I mean, you could do 15 at close, and the rest is earned out and seller note. And sometimes sellers will be feeling like they're trying to trick me. They're trying to do something to me. Like, how do you explain earnouts and seller notes to business owners when you're looking at offers that they've gotten or offers they're thinking about?
Yeah, so I think let's talk about earnouts. So I think the last statistic I saw, which this will blow your mind. So I think it was something like over 70% of earnouts don't get paid out.
Jeez.
Yeah, so let that sink in. So
basically, you're not going to get that money.
Pretty much, yeah. So when I work with clients, I said, look, earnouts, we're not going to count on earnouts. So when we factor this into your personal financial planning, we're not going to count on it. And there's 2 reasons why. So number 1 is typically the buyer is going to set the high watermark. So whatever your best year is, that's typically what they're going to set as the earnout, whether it's based on revenue or profit. The second component is once you sell, you pretty much lose the majority, if not all, control of the company. So decisions are then being made by the buyer. And so if you have a buyer that, doesn't know your industry, doesn't know your business, that comes in, I mean, if they don't execute, make the right decisions, then you're set up for failure. And so that's how I explain the earnout. And, the other thing, going back to your question around time frame, a lot of owners, they think like, okay, I want to exit in a year, wipe my hands clean and be done. I've literally never come across a deal that did not have some type of earnout or some type of contract to stay with the company at least 2 to 3 years. So when you talk about, I want to exit my company in a year, you got to keep in mind, most likely that's going to be 3, 4, even 5 years, because you're going to have to stay on, post close. So the earnout, I'd say, is not guaranteed. The second component, which you talked about, which is, understanding, the kind of the seller's note, which actually can be a really good strategy from a tax perspective, because it spreads out your tax liability over a period of time. But as a seller, this is really, really important, is that you have to make sure that the buyer is going to be very capable of running your business. Because usually when you do like a seller's note, those are kind of the unique times where maybe you'll just stay on for a year and maybe you'll kind of step back. But once again, you have no control. You've now sold your company to the buyer. And same thing, if that buyer doesn't execute and the company doesn't do well, I mean, it's like a loan. I mean, it's like you lent them money and they're not going to be able to pay you back. So, those are the 2 things I always kind of caution them with. Which, I mean, they're great tools, the seller notes, because you get more buyers that are willing to come to the table because they don't have to come up with as much capital. But it's at that point, instead of them just interviewing you, like you're interviewing them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so let's double click on that. I mean, because like specifically for this audience, like maybe doing advanced manufacturing, maybe they're distributing products in a very specialized niche. Like, how many people just have that knowledge? Like, unless it's just a strategic coming to the table, their biggest competitor is going to buy them out. Like, probably you could have some comfort. Like, they're not going to screw the pooch. They're not going to mess it all up. They're going to be able to make good on the seller note. But when there's this rise of maybe entrepreneurs who are doing acquisition, so maybe it's an individual who has like some sort of management background, has built up some capital, or is raising capital to buy the company. Like, how do you evaluate people? Like, are you looking for, if you're doing a food service equipment company and the buyer doesn't come from food service, it's like, no, they're not it. Find me somebody who's done this for 50 years. Like, where's the line exactly?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple caveats to this, right? And so, if the owner has taken the right steps, right? We talked about different areas to increase the value of the business, but it's also important when you look at the transferability of the business, and that's, do they have the right people in place? Because if you've put a pretty strong leadership team in place that's going to stay on once you sell the company, that's going to put your mind at ease too, because to your point, they have that specialty knowledge around that niche. So if you've done the right job as far as pulling yourself out of the business and teaching other people within your company that can take the reins over once you leave, that's one step, right? And then from there, Absolutely. I mean, depending upon what you do, I would say in that industry, you have to understand the business. Like you have to understand, and there's two components, right? One is the specialized area of knowledge. The other one is the strategic side. So, you know, just because they don't have the specialized knowledge doesn't mean they can't grow the business. Maybe it's not, the industry that they've been used to, but if it's something comparable and there are similar ways to scale the business, that's why you see in some cases great CEOs that run companies that, they'll go from companies that literally have probably no similarities in industry, but they understand the strategic side. But in order for you to do that, you have to have the right team in place that covers that expertise. If you don't, then, to your point, you have to have somebody that understands that business.
So that's the trade-off, right? So it's like you could either build a great team and let your cash flow dip, but like have something that anybody could buy, or you could be lean on investing in the company, run everything yourself, but then when you're ready to leave, just look for the perfect successor. Like, which of the two is is there an answer? Is one of the two of those better? Or is it just like, it depends?
Yeah, well, it does. It depends on what the owner's looking. I always describe there's two different business owners. One's a lifestyle business owner. The other one's a wealth creator. And so a lifestyle business owner is one that you just mentioned, which is cash flow, right? Their number one thing is like, hey, I fund my lifestyle through the cash of the business. So I want to try to, for the most part, run it as lean as possible. And if I have to take on more duties so that I get more income at the end of the year, then that's what I'm going to do. A wealth creator business owner is somebody that looks at their business from more of a value perspective. So they're willing to take less cash on a regular basis, knowing that where they're going to capitalize is when they go to exit the company. And so by building that team in place, again, cash flow is going to be lower, right? They're not going to be making as much money, but the buyer is going to pay more for that. And so for those of your audience that maybe aren't as familiar, businesses are typically valued on a multiple of EBITDA. And so
what's EBITDA? Let's say that real quick, because I think
EBITDA
I used that term and I didn't explain.
So it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So the easiest way to describe it is it's pretty much your bottom line profit. And so what determines that multiple are those factors that I talked about earlier, right? Which is client concentration, your people, owner dependency, your brand. And so if you have the right team in place, I'll use an example. So let's say your company is, let's say it's worth $1 million. We'll just make it an easy round number. And, let's say the average multiple on the industry, which I think in this industry is probably between 5 and 7. So let's just say, for example, you get a 5 multiple, and so you're doing $1 million in profit. Your company is probably worth $5 million. Well, if you have the right leadership team in place, you bump yourself up by 1 multiple. So you go from a 5 to a 6. Right? That's $1 million. I mean, that's material. When you go to exit, that's $1 million in your pocket. So again, it just depends, like you said, on as an owner, what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to just, fund your lifestyle for the rest of your life from the business? And that's fine. You're going to run your business a certain way. Or if you're trying to generate true generational wealth, then you're operating the business, more from a standpoint that you're building on value, not on cash flow.
Yeah. That's a hard one because to just play devil's advocate, like you're doing 500K in, let's say, EBITDA, and then you hire up your best guy from your company to be the general manager, and you pay him 200K. Now you have 300K coming in essentially to your family forever without doing anything. Like, why would you sell at that point? Like, why is it necessary to have that lump sum? It'll be taxed incredibly high. Why is it even necessary to do that? Why would anybody do that?
So there's a couple of reasons. So number one, again, it's all about being strategic. So there's got to be a reason why, you hired that general manager, promoted that general manager. I mean, you didn't just do it to increase the cost of your company. So there has to be some type of return on investment. If you're going to hire more people, or if you're going to pay your top people more money, you're doing it because you see a return on investment, whether it's reducing expenses of the company, whether it's creating more revenue for the company. So that's the first way I would look at it is, obviously if you're looking at it from a business owner standpoint, you're saying, hey, I'm just going to pay somebody an extra $200,000 and they're not going to give you anything in return. You're probably not a very good business owner.
Right.
So, and then your question around taxes. So, that's the other thing, it's if you don't plan appropriately. And when I say, plan appropriately, I'm talking at least a year, ideally 2 years out from exiting your business, you will pay a ton of taxes. But if you are able to wait and do it a year to 2 years out, again, ideally 2 years out, you can structure the sale to where you'll still pay taxes, but you can probably reduce your taxes by anywhere between 10 to 15%, which again is material, right? On $1 million deal, that's $150,000. So,
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that you've gone through kind of the biggest problem areas that you see when someone's trying to sell. But if you could just let's pretend you're trying to replace yourself and you're trying to prepare someone to sell 3 years ahead. What should they be doing year 1, 2, and 3? Like say that they're not going to hire you, but like you're going to tell them everything right now. What should they be doing?
Yeah. So number one is to get a formal valuation. That's step one. You have to understand what your baseline is. Number two is understanding what your wealth gap is. And so that's where we're going to transition to the personal side is, let's say your company's worth, $5 million. Is that going to be enough to take care of you and your family? If it's not, then we got some work to do. So that's your, let's say you're 3 years out. That's the very first thing you should be doing is understanding what the value of your company is and then what you personally need to make, again, after taxes from the company to be able to fulfill your personal financial goals. All right. Year two is when we're really starting to dig into how do we move that number. So again, let's just say, for instance, your company's worth 5 million. Your wealth gap is 7 million. You need to get to $7 million. So what are we doing over the next year to 2 years to close that gap, to get you from a $5 million valuation company to a $7 million valuation? So that's where the real intense work happens, is in that second year. Then once we optimize it, right, you're a year out from exit, then we're starting to do, a lot of the tax planning. We're starting to do a lot of the deal structure. So we're going to decide what's the best exit for you, because not everybody's going to want to sell their company. Some may want to pass it down to family. Some want to maybe sell to employees. So we're going to identify, okay, what's the appropriate path based on your goals, what you're trying to accomplish. And then as we come down the home stretch, again, it's just really just doing a quick quality control check. I walk through owners, we do two things. One, we do a readiness assessment, and then we do an attractiveness assessment. So it's A, are you even ready to exit? Is your company, are you personally in good shape to exit? Mm-hmm. And then B, is your company attractive, right? If we were to take your company to market today, is it going to be attractive enough to get buyers, right? And by that point, we should have fixed most of the issues to where it's a no-brainer. You're taking a company to market that is going to have enough, buyers that'll want to buy it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Last question. Are you a sports fan?
I am a huge sports fan.
We have to hit on the Lakers sale. It's so relevant. For those listening aren't familiar with the Lakers, bought by Dr. Jerry Buss, I believe it was, years ago, and really turned the franchise around, did a lot of great stuff, left it to his children. Children started infighting, and as of last week, it seems like some of them decided to sell without the knowledge of the other children.
Yeah.
And so I know we're talking about like strategy and tactics and stuff, but like on a family side of this, like how do you deal with succession? And also one of my favorite shows is Succession on HBO, where they're just total infighting, which is another good reason to get rid of your company and sell it and just let the stuff be evenly divided and not let there be this power grab getting in between the real family unit. But do you see this kind of stuff? Like, and how do you advise people? Because it's almost like a therapist should be involved, not necessarily like a wealth advisor.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on this. I've got stories, but I'm going to tell you about a good success story, one where I've seen them do it right. And this is one that's actually getting ready to be passed down to the third generation, which, less than 12% of family-owned businesses make it to the third generation. Usually by that time, it's like you mentioned, there's infighting, there's issues, or really just that third generation either doesn't want anything to do with the company or they don't know how to run it. But this company that I've worked with, it's a beautiful story. So it was started by the patriarch, the father. There was 4 boys, and each of the 4 boys kind of took on different roles and responsibilities within the company. Like one was kind of the main business development person. One ran the CFO type of role. The other person was kind of running the full operations. The other one was focused on the brand, client experience. So they all held different positions, and they all had a role that fit like their specific skill set. And so as they kind of grew the company and kind of took it to the next level, I want to say that this company started off doing about, I think it was doing around 3 or 4 million in revenue. About 3 or 4 million. The four brothers basically ran it for about 15 years, got it up to, I think right now, where it's worth probably, or not worth, but it's probably doing about 25 million in revenue.
Wow.
So a pretty significant increase. And so now they're looking to pass it down to the next generation. And so they've done a couple different things. Number one, timing. So they kind of said, "Hey, we want this to happen within 3 years," is what their time frame is. They've engaged the right advisors to kind of talk about it from a tax standpoint, the right strategy with that. And then more importantly, once again, in this case, there's going to be two of the COO of the company, his two sons are going to take over the company. So it's whittled it down from four brothers. It'll be down to two of the sons. And again, they've both kind of split roles. One of them's really good on the operations side. The other one's really good on the finance side. So they've already have roles built out. And essentially over those next 3 years, they're going to get mentorship from their dad and their uncles on how to basically understand the business and how to run it. So it's a great example of a business that's going to be passed down to the third generation, and it's going to be done the right way. I'll make it real quick on a couple of stories that you touched on. Usually the problem is that when they go to pass the business down, the kids look at it more as like an asset rather than a business. So in their mind, they're like, "Hey, mom and dad had a $50 million business. Maybe there's three siblings, right? So we each get a third, a third, a third. I want that in cash. One of them maybe wants to continue to run the business. The other one maybe doesn't care either way." And that's usually where you start to run into problems, is that there's no consistent communication in terms of what each person wants. And then more importantly is, do they even have the capability to run the business? That's another big issue I see.
So how far in advance should it could be a business owner, it could be like you described, a family business, which could be multiple different siblings, husband and wife, whatever it is. How far in advance should they be essentially trying to figure out, is the exit plan sell to someone else or is it to keep it in the family? Because that seems like, to your point, are they capable? Can't wait a year before you want to sell and decide if they're capable. So at what point do they need to start having those conversations even between themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think the earlier the better. I mean, I typically when we work with clients, we'll have just a general discussion, but we really kind of hammer down what that's going to look like about a year to a year and a half prior to the actual exit. If it is family, I would say you're going to need a little bit more time because there's discussions around, A, do the kids want the business, and B, do they even know how to operate it? I'm starting to see, less and less kids that want to take over the business. They want to kind of do their own thing. And then again, it goes back to that wealth gap, your real number. That can dictate a lot of your options. If you need a certain dollar amount, you really may not have a choice other than to sell the company. And it's got to happen a certain way, so it all depends. But I would say, again, that's where that time frame comes into play. The earlier, the better. But I'd say at a bare minimum, I'd say at least a year and a half to 2 years out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. No, I mean, this has been really great. I'm sure people all the time, they're trying to get in contact with the guests and pick their brains more. If people want to get in contact with you, what would be a good way to do that? LinkedIn, email, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media channels. You can find us at Harvest Wealth Strategies, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Obviously on LinkedIn, it's underneath my name which is Anthony Perez J. I do want to say, so we do a free value gap assessment. So it's something, like I mentioned, if you're just curious on what an informal value of the company would be, it's about a 20-minute questionnaire, very basic. And we can kind of give you an idea of what the value could potentially be today, but more importantly, where your business and your industry can be at, in the future. To get that, you can go to our website, which is harvestwealthstrategies.net, or you can email me directly and we can get you the link to get that completed.
Sounds great. I'll put all that in the show notes. Anthony Perez, awesome. I appreciate your time, sir.
Yeah. No, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.